The Japanese tea ceremony is something that both interests and confuses people when they first visit Japan. With so many steps, utensils, and concepts, the Japanese tea ceremony is both fascinating and difficult to fully understand. In this video, we're going to break down what the Japanese tea ceremony is, but more importantly, what it represents. We highly recommend watching this video before you take part in a tea ceremony of your own so you can know what to expect. Before we get started, it would really mean a lot to us if you could like this video and subscribe to our channel to stay tuned for future tea videos. We have hundreds of tea videos on all sorts of different topics, but for this video, we're going to focus on the Japanese tea ceremony. Without further ado, let's get started. First, what is the Japanese tea ceremony? The Japanese tea ceremony is essentially a practice that uses matcha tea as a way to promote a positive relationship between the host and their guest. While there are some complexities and nuance to the Japanese tea ceremony, its core values lie in simplicity. All you need to do is step into the Japanese tea house to experience this simplicity. The tea room is sparsely decorated with nothing but a scroll and a flower arrangement. There are a few objects around to prepare the tea, but these are not the focus. The main focus of the tea ceremony are the four principles, wa, ke, sei, and jaku, and the objects simply serve as a way to demonstrate these principles. Among the objects used in the Japanese tea ceremony are the matcha utensils, which we will discuss next. As the tea master enters the tea room, she will present the utensils to be used in the Japanese tea ceremony. There are 9 main tea utensils we will be discussing today, each of which has its own use and significance. The fukusa. This is the dry cloth the tea master uses to clean off the utensils before preparing the tea. The significance of this is practical as well as symbolic. As a sign of respect, the tea master is cleaning the utensils in front of the guest so that they can be assured that they're clean. Natsume. This is the first item to be cleaned and purified by the tea master. The natsume is also called the tea caddy, and it's how the matcha powder is transported. The matcha powder is often sifted beforehand to remove the clumps, and then it's brought into the tea room to be prepared. Chashaku. This is the bamboo teaspoon used to scoop the matcha powder into the bowl. The chashaku is simply designed, but it's the perfect tool to scoop powder out of the natsume as it has a more vertical design rather than a typical horizontal design. The tea master uses 2 large scoops of the chashaku, which comes out to around 2 grams of matcha powder. This is the perfect amount for a bowl of matcha tea. Kama. This is the iron pot used to heat the water for the Japanese tea ceremony. A perfect square is carved out of the tatami mats, and then it's enclosed by a flame-resistant material. Beneath the iron pot is hot coals that heat up the water throughout the tea ceremony. Hishaku. This is the bamboo ladle used to scoop water out of the kama in order to prepare the matcha tea. The hishaku has a long handle to reach the water within the iron pot, and the tea master pours the water slowly so it cools off just before it's used to prepare the matcha tea. Boiling water is too hot to prepare a good tasting matcha, so it needs to be cooled slightly through this technique. Matcha bowl. This is the clay tea bowl used in the Japanese tea ceremony, and it's also called the chawan. It is made from a heavy clay, and it often has a beautiful pattern on one side. The bowl is preheated beforehand, so it keeps the matcha warm throughout the tea ceremony, and the higher walls of the bowl make it easier to prepare the tea. Matcha whisk. This is perhaps the most famous of the tea utensils. The chasen, or bamboo matcha whisk, is carved out of a single piece of bamboo, and the 100 small bristles move through the water quickly to aerate the tea. This tool has been used for hundreds of years in the tea ceremony, but it still works better than any modern tool. Kensui. This is the wastewater bowl used in the Japanese tea ceremony. Sometimes water is used for things other than preparing tea, like heating up the matcha bowl. This water needs to be discarded, and the kensui is the most graceful way to do that. This makes it so that the tea master doesn't need to leave the tea room during the ceremony. Finally, the chakin. The chakin is a separate cloth used by the tea master to clean off the matcha bowl. While the fukusa is kept dry to clean off the dry utensils, the chakin is used to clean off the wet utensils like the bowl. What are the steps in the Japanese tea ceremony? The Japanese tea ceremony requires many small steps that are repeated in careful order. To learn these steps, tea masters must practice nearly every day, and there are even schools dedicated to learning the Japanese tea ceremony. Today we're going to just cover a few of the broad strokes and why each step matters. Step 1. Bowing. Before the tea master enters the room, she will stand at the entrance and bow to the guests, at which point the guests are expected to bow back. This is a simple introduction and a demonstration of respect. Mutual respect is a very important part of the tea ceremony and something we will discuss later in more detail. Step 2. The purification of teaware. After the tea master sets down the teaware, she will begin to purify it. This is done to demonstrate to the guests that the teaware used to make their tea is clean and pure. The fukusa is taken out and unfolded and later is used to clean the tea utensils, starting with the natsume and then the chashaku. Step 3. The preparation of the matcha tea utensils. After the teaware is purified, the tea master needs to prepare the utensils for making the matcha tea. She will take the fukusa and open up the iron pot to gather some hot water. This hot water will be poured into the chawan in order to preheat it. The matcha bowl is made from thick clay, so it absorbs a lot of heat. If it is not properly heated beforehand, the matcha bowl will absorb much of the heat from the matcha tea and cause it to get cold much more quickly. While the water is still warm, the tea master will then take the matcha whisk or chasen and dip it gently into the water. She will then give it a quick whisk around in the water. By soaking the matcha whisk in water, you make it more pliable and less likely to break. When this delicate wood is dry, it can be quite brittle and easily broken. After the matcha bowl and matcha whisk have been prepared, the water is poured out of the matcha bowl into the kensui and the matcha bowl is cleaned off using the chakin. The tea master is now ready to prepare the matcha tea. Step 4. Preparing matcha tea. Finally, we get to the most important part of the tea ceremony, and that is the preparation of the matcha tea. This is seen as the main event of the Japanese tea ceremony that everything else is building up to. First, the tea master will take 2 large scoops of matcha powder from the natsume and place it into the matcha bowl. She will then scoop less than a full hishaku full of water into the bowl, making sure to pour it really slowly so it has a chance to cool off before it touches the matcha powder. Finally, the tea master will take the matcha whisk and gently scrape the sides of the tea bowl to mix the matcha in and then begin to whisk up the tea in a zigzag motion. By whisking the matcha tea in this way, the tea master is able to create a light foam on top, which gives it a smoother consistency and taste. When the matcha bowl is finished, the tea master sets the matcha whisk aside and turns the bowl so that the design faces the guest. Step 5. Drinking the matcha tea. Now comes time for the guest to play a role in the Japanese tea ceremony. While the guest's job may be far easier than the job of the host, there is still some tea ceremony etiquette to be mindful of when drinking the matcha tea. First, you should bow when the tea is presented to you to convey gratitude without speaking. You can then take the bowl of tea and place it onto your tatami mat before drinking it. The bowl can then be held with 2 hands, and you should turn it so that the pattern or design on the bowl faces the other guests. This is seen as a sign of respect, allowing the other guests to view the most beautiful part of the bowl as you drink. After you are done, you can place the bowl on the other side of the tatami mat where it was presented to you. Step 6. Wagashi. The wagashi or Japanese sweets are another aspect of the Japanese tea ceremony in addition to the matcha tea. These are made with simple ingredients and often used to convey the theme of the tea ceremony. They are meant to complement the flavor of the matcha with the sweetness of the wagashi smoothing out the bitterness of the matcha. It should be eaten whenever it is presented to you and should be finished so that the host knows that you liked it. What are the principles of the Japanese tea ceremony? While the steps and utensils used in the tea ceremony seem to get all the attention, the principles are what is most important. These principles are wa, ke, sei, jaku, or harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. We will briefly cover each of these principles and how they are represented in the tea ceremony. Harmony. Harmony is the positive interaction between the host and the guest. This is an ideal that people should always strive towards, not just in the tea ceremony, but also in the outside world. The matcha tea is not a solitary pursuit, but something to be shared between the host and their guest. Respect. Respect is the ability to understand and appreciate others. The guest should be thinking of the host throughout the tea ceremony, and the host should be thinking of the guest throughout the tea ceremony. Inside the tea room, all people are equal, regardless of their status outside the tea room. The respect for people is conveyed through bowing and deference in the tea ceremony, and respect for objects is conveyed through the treatment of the matcha utensils. Objects of different values are treated the same, just as people of different outside status are treated the same during the Japanese tea ceremony. Purity. Purity is the ability to treat oneself and others with a pure heart. The concept of purity in the tea ceremony is not only demonstrated when the tea master purifies the matcha tea ceremony utensils, but before the guest even enters the tea room. Before entering the tea room, the guest must purify their hands at the sukubai and also purify their hearts and minds. Only after they have left their worldly thoughts and worries behind are they able to enjoy something as simple as a bowl of tea in silence. Tranquility. Tranquility is achieved when the other 3 principles are realized. This is a sense of selflessness, and while it is the ultimate goal of practicing the tea ceremony, in a way it is still just the beginning. The principles need to be constantly practiced to maintain tranquility, and the matcha tea ceremony is the way to train. How can you make your own matcha tea ceremony? A lot of tea drinkers like to make their own matcha tea ceremony at home. While it is possible to get all the utensils we mentioned earlier, there are 3 main ones that are most important. The matcha whisk, matcha bowl, and matcha spoon are used to prepare a bowl of matcha tea that tastes just like the matcha tea ceremony. This is a good way to practice some of the principles of the Japanese tea ceremony, even if you're not in Japan. Even though you may not see it being used in the Japanese tea ceremony, you also may want to invest in a metal sifter, or furui, to sift your matcha powder. Matcha powder will automatically form clumps as it's exposed to the humidity in the air, and this can make it so that your matcha tea doesn't mix as evenly. If you really want to get the most out of your matcha tea ceremony, this extra sifting step can make all the difference. If you're looking for the best matcha set to create your own matcha tea ceremony, look no further than this matcha bundle here. This bundle includes 21 different types of matcha tea, plus the matcha whisk, matcha bowl, and matcha spoon. With this bundle, not only do you get to try a huge assortment of different matcha teas, you will also get all the tools you need to prepare them the proper way. Thank you all so much for watching this video. We hope you have found it helpful when it comes to making your own matcha tea ceremony at home. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Until then, we'll see you next time.